Good afternoon, everyone. My presentation will be on a critical analysis of the UNESCO OER recommendation, which is based on the content that is the abstract, the profile, and introduction, the UNESCO OER recommendation itself, the position in my country, the analysis of the OER, analysis of definition and scope, the reflection on the five objectives of OER, and the conclusion. This paper will analyze the OER recommendation for my module Open Education in Society, which is part of the assignment. And the purpose of this project is to present a short analysis based on the class discussion and to look at the UNESCO OER recommendation and how its goals can be implemented and as well how to identify the drawbacks, the missing elements, and any other interpretation. So this is basically a critical paper where suggestion and contributions are intended. So first in this paper, the OER recommendation is analyzed from a teacher's perspective because I come from the teachers community, and this paper will mostly reflect my critical analysis as a teacher, considerably because of the unique and pivotal position occupied by teachers in the teaching and learning process. Our perception on the OER recommendation is important as well. Now, the aim here is to offer a brief analysis on the UNESCO OER recommendation and how its goal might be fulfilled, as well as to identify any shortcomings, the missing element. Recommendation on open education resources was adopted by the UNESCO's General Conference on its 40th session held in Paris from November 12 to November 27, 2019. This marks the culmination of a long effort after almost 20 years of work to promote access to educational resources under free and open licenses, as well as accessible to all. OER are learning, teaching, and research materials in any format and medium that reside in the public domain or under copyright that have been released under an open license that permit no-cost access, reuse, repurpose, adaptation, distribution by others. Now, based on the objectives, through work on these strategic objectives, it will be possible to support cooperation across countries to reduce duplication and enhance existing resources, encourage governments and educational and research organizations to develop policies with open license for related materials, also support education and research communities to create, modify, distribute with open licenses, and develop sustainable models for educational resources. Where is this recommendation leading to? Now, we need to understand that today the digital environment offers many opportunities for learning experiences, and in a rapidly changing and globalizing world, many initiatives to modernize education and to optimize student learning are being considered around the world. So, are of challenges such as barriers to learning opportunity for underserved people, high cost of access, low relevance of educational material to local context, or lack of materials in local languages. In the same light, Varuglu in 2021 stated that OER integration can be a catalyst for the development of human capital and inclusive knowledge societies in which young girls and boys, students, researchers, and the general public have the unprecedented opportunity to freely acquire and share contextual knowledge on all socially relevant topics such as education, health, labor, and the economy. OER can bring new solutions to these challenges while enabling teachers as well as learners to participate in an interconnected world. In the same line, according to UNESCO OER recommendation 2019, learning, teaching, and research materials in any format and medium that reside in the public domain or under the copyright that has been released under an open license that permits no cost access, reuse, repurpose, adaptation, and redistribution by others. In the last few years, open education resources have gained much attention, and eventually, since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, free online resources have continued to grow in importance. The value of OER is that they are a tool that can be used by the government and citizens, enabling them to create knowledge. In my country, that is Mauritius, quite far from the OE concept. 2000 to 2005 period, the government came up with the idea of an open learning institute that would have the mandate of promoting open education in the country. The idea later evolved into that of an open university in 2005, but it never came into operation that way. The rationale of an open university in Mauritius is not so clear in terms of the size of the island. Now, therefore, the vision and the mission of such organization should be clearly linked to the national priorities in line with the needs of our society. The question of whether Mauritius really need an open university or a national open education model is not a mutually exclusive one. However, while the concept of a university will be in essence denote autonomy, what is more important is for the open university to have a functional open education model. As highlighted by Kanwar in 2011, the current open education model is based on the concept of the open educational resources move. However, the primary concern of the Open University of Mauritius will not be that it is related to the developing of open education resources, but rather to how can existing OER and repository be best used to provide a high quality learning experience to the students. The Open University of Mauritius is definitely not under the OER business model. Educational resources, they are not produced freely, but they are rather distributed freely. That's the question that is being asked. When we analyze the OER recommendation, there are some confusing phrases and ambiguous terminology that leads to misunderstanding in the UNESCO OER recommendation. It also shows a lack of clarity about what exactly the role of OER is, whether the materials are used exclusively in formal education or they are used to support informal and non-formal education. Related to this is the concern about the quality, whether it is suitable for the lower level learners or is it aimed for university or any other specific community of learners? As such, who creates the OER? The OER recommendation expresses the need to support the disadvantaged communities. However, the same community is deprived or has less access to the digital world. So the first point here, if we take the definition, there are multiple definitions of the OER form. The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, UNESCO, the Cape Town Open Education Declaration, the Wiki Educator OER Handbook, and the OER Commons. But the UNESCO definition defines the OER requires no cost access. Various less stringent definitions have been adapted over the years in effort to allow the commercial sale of the OER, for example, requiring that a CC BY license be used. In my opinion, the no cost is important and an essential component of the definition of the OER as it enhances the aims and objective of OER. Utilizing or connecting OER to education promotes strengthening universal access to information-related activities, regardless to any factor that is seen as a challenge to access education. Number two is the open license. The open license goes beyond content. It is also important to consider not just the outputs content, but also any specific software needed to access and utilize them. It is mostly recommended to always utilize open software, and in the same point, respect copyright is quite inadequate as you cannot license property you don't own. Point number three states the ICT provides access to OER. However, when we take ICT as a medium, we need to ensure that the targeted community has access to technology. Very often, if traditional books that is, the materials are not often accessible to the learners who have financial issues, it is most unlikely that they have access to technology without spending. Number four, stakeholders. In point four, it relates to anyone with an interest to lifelong learning. The whole community is directly or indirectly connected to education, and especially those countries as well that seek to enable their citizens build capacity and cultivate human capital, the understanding and genuine significance of the sharing of mutual benefit across international borders. Number five focuses which sustains the phrase effective use of high quality educational and research materials and programs of study. This leads to wonder about what defines high quality and what would lower quality resources mean. Would it be material from prestige organization or a product from a student? Also, it seems that only materials are known to be high quality and effective in the context to support the SDG 4. But we also have to be careful that the assessment and evaluation of quality should not become a burden that prohibits some entities from creating and distributing OER. Hence, considering the assessment of quality is the provision of mechanisms that are more likely to promote quality outcomes. Instead of becoming a barrier, quality should be an OER policy that can help people achieve. Nobody wants to be an advocate for non-quality OER. For number 7, will this meet the desirable learning outcome and to what extent? And for number 8, should we be involving all the stakeholders jointly? to ensure the evaluation of a material from different points. Capacity building is the key enabler of any OER strategy. However, we should be referring to the stakeholders like Ministry of Education, management of institution, legal expert, and policymakers that include knowledge sharing, the creation of pedagogic material training and technical assistance, mentoring, and coaching through projects specific to the content. In Mauritius, the awareness was brought in 2017, but then after that, there hasn't been any teachers training or much involvement. For the building awareness, the teacher should be OER literate to attain one range of objectives and also being able to use the OER as needed and understanding its base. It is equally important to understand how the copyright works, but we should also understand that copyright is not an absolute. We only need the basic to understand how it works. With regards to the digital literacy, I certainly agree that digital literacy, as mentioned, is important, but there are we looking for a special skill? It's not mentioned. Are we looking for the use in development and the use of OER or just a general support for digital technology? For number three here, while we point out quality OER, how are we measuring that when we include quality? Number four, which model are we precisely talking about? Because in Mauritius, on the initial action to open education, the model is changed to only being a distant learning model. It's very unlikely we will in short term be able to rely on OER exclusively, or may it be desirable to do so for a variety of reasons. And I would point out that it's so important and widely understood in the educational community to be important that the people involved have a voice in the development of and the use of OER and not just merely access to those created and produced by others. The funding mechanism need to be also effective unless they're fully funded through public funds. But then the question is how far this will be sustainable. As well as with the respect of our country's size, geographical location, economic capability, like right now in the concept of Mauritius, it will or maybe it will take more years for that to be successful. And this also defines the success and the challenges are in the process of